Welcome to Trust Yourself, the podcast, the place where we learn that trust is earned and not given, even with ourselves. I'm your host, Betsy. I'm extraordinarily glad that you're here. Stick around. Welcome back to another episode of Trust Yourself. This is part 2 of a series of how to trust your gut and work with Western medicine. If you didn't listen to part 1, you are highly advised to go back and listen. So just pause this episode and go back to part 1. In part 1 are essential pieces to the puzzle that I will be referring to in this episode. I also want to let you know that there are brief mentions of animal abuse and trauma from my childhood, so it's not suitable for children, and please take care while listening. All right, so despite that warning that I just gave, this is not going to be all doom and gloom, and in fact, it's sort of a testament to walking through the fire, walking through the mud, and coming out on the other side with hope and with what I described in the first episode. The idea that in order for us to live happy, healthful, joyous, productive lives, we need to trust ourselves. We need to trust our guts, we need to trust our bodies, and work hand in hand with Western medicine. So that is in fact what these stories are a demonstration of. Real quick, let's go over, there's a little bit of a misnomer when it comes to intuition, and I purposefully named these podcasts How to Trust Your Gut, sort of as a double entendre. Again, if you listen to the first episode, you know why. When people say trust your gut, a lot of times they do mean just your gut, just your belly, just your lower region, which really is called the enteric brain, which means that there are cells in your gut that think independently from your brain. It's called your enteric brain. There's also, separately, cells inside your heart that think independently of your gut and of your brain. And so when people say follow your heart or trust your heart, when people say follow your gut or trust your gut, really what needs to happen is all three of those need to be integrated. And truly, your intuition lives throughout your body and throughout your emotional guidance system. So just as we spoke about at the end of the last podcast, there are many more misnomers and confusing things out there about what intuition is and what intuition isn't than arguably there are about learning any other foreign language. However, it is a language, you can learn it. If you want to know more, you can take my free class on my website, How to Trust Your Intuition Without Second Guessing in the Face of Fear, Doubt, and Uncertainty. That's at BetsyLaFay.com. So let's talk about what happened over this past, mainly over the winter, but it started in the fall. And to give a background of how it even started in the fall, we have to talk about basically a calendar year ago. So very briefly, I've actually thought about going back and forth about having a whole podcast about Munchausen by proxy. And at this point, I have decided just to refer you all to the YouTube video that I made. It kind of has nearly everything there about my experience, and I don't really feel like I need to recreate it on the podcast. But for us all to be on the same page, Munchausen is when a person fakes medical illnesses for themselves to get sympathy, to get attention, and it's not the same as being a hypochondriac. Munchausen by proxy is when usually a caregiver, usually a woman, but it could be a man, a lot of times it's a mother, or sometimes it's a caregiver for someone elderly, but really it could be at any age, as I've experienced, where one person fakes illness within another to get sympathy and attention. So the mother will purposefully make, let's say, just keep it simple, their daughter sick, make up illnesses, convince the child and the doctor that they have illnesses. They will medicate the fake illnesses and then also prevent diagnosis for real things going on. So it's a giving of things they don't need and withholding things they do. I know this sounds really terrible and really cruel, and it is. That's the by proxy part on another. And that is what I am a survivor of. And currently now, Sunday, July 24th, I am 42 years old, and I only found this out when I was 41. I found this out just over a calendar year ago. And how I found out was, let's just get like the darkest part out of the gate, out of the way. I moved back home during the pandemic, and my team and I worked diligently to create what some call passive income or recurring profit every month. And so my team and I worked really diligently for about 3 months and created a system so that for 9 months in a row, all my bills would be paid. I had recurring profit for 9 months, so all my bills would be paid. My parents are elderly, and they both had their issues. I won't get into what they are, but, I was a social worker for 10 years in New York City, and for the majority of that time, I was responsible for other people's medical needs, for dispensing meds, for conferring with doctors and doctor's appointments, making sure that people got the right meds, didn't take too much meds, didn't take too few meds, and there was a lot of medically complicated issues that I had to deal with. And I also accompanied people out in the community and so forth. Oh, I helped them meal plan, grocery shop. Well, I wound up putting my work on hold with my parents and helping them. It's almost basically the American dream. How many people in the pandemic wish that they had enough money to stop work and take care of their parents? And again, I was overly qualified for the job. Well, things were getting really bad. And what I mean by bad is my mother was really, really acting out. She was being extraordinarily abusive with her words mainly, but we'll get into what else. And I was in therapy, and I wound up getting therapy twice a week for a pretty long period of time. And I worked with a different therapist then than I do have now. And I will say that she was great for some things and terrible for others. Just the facts. I'm not holding on to resentment or anything like that. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses. However, as I shared what was going on in my family, she had never paused to say, hey, well, that's abuse or anything like that, which I know my therapist now would do. We talked about it. However, it was when I was getting some space, I was prevented from going on a family vacation because, quote unquote, I would cause too much stress to my mother just by being. The truth of the matter is the entire time I just asked people to be kind to me. That's across the board, in text, in person. I never raised my voice, never said anything mean, like literally, I can say that. So I was getting some space. I was at a friend's cabin by myself for a week, and I had a therapy appointment. And I had said to my therapist, I said, oh yeah, by the way, I told you how my parents refused to feed their cat. And she was like, wait, what? And I had known this for months, and it was by sharing that fact, and I hadn't shared it with my therapist because there was so much else going on. Twice a week, I literally was, jam-packing it with all this other stuff that was going on. And that's when she said, that sounds like Munchausen by proxy. So I looked it up, and if you want more information about my experience, I am an open book about it, but it's all in a YouTube video that's on my YouTube channel. You can just Google my name on YouTube and you can find it. While I was living there taking care of them, they were actually still physically poisoning me. And in the same way that I had many arguments with them about feeding their cat, which they refused, I had many arguments with them about not using poisonous chemicals to me that would give me a rash and give me a stomachache, and they would repeatedly slip it back in, which is what was happening during my childhood with food, with medication, and with withholding as well. So it's very, very intense. So if you're feeling a little heavy-hearted, I understand. I went through it. And if I ever sound glib or short about it, it's just because I've done a lot of healing, and I've lived with it for quite a while. So I'm talking about this because when I got kicked out of my family, and why did I get kicked out of my family? I got kicked out of my family because I asked every single one of them individually and collectively in text and things like this to be kind to me, to be as kind to me as they were in front of the neighbors, as they were behind closed doors. And when you talk to any narcissist, any covert narcissist, any narcissist, or anyone in a narcissistic family unit, or even, again, hearkening back to the cults, if you bring up boundaries with a narcissist, they will get upset and turn it around on you. They'll project, they'll deflect, they'll use word salad. These are all the things that we've talked about on previous episodes. And so so for instance, one of my relatives on the phone was not my parents. I said, yeah, we can have a relationship if you go to therapy and you learn nonviolent communication and you learn how to treat me kindly. To which this person responded, I'm not one of your clients. You can't treat me like one of your clients. And she meant, coaching clients. And by the way, I've never had to say what to one of my clients because I would never take on a client who abused me. So I've actually had other narcissists sort of turn around and say things like that to me, which in the moment did stun me, but it's very strange because none of it is how I work with people. Again, because I would never work with anyone. I literally say you can't pay me enough to be abused, which I usually take in a completely different context. But if I'm not going to enjoy working with you, and I certainly will not enjoy working with you if you're abusive, then I'm not going to take you on as a client, as a student, however, for a reading. So it's really just a way for them to deflect, to project, and to minimize and really weaponize what it was that I was asking for a boundary. So I got kicked out of my family. I thought it was actually July 10th, but it was actually July 5th. So I put out a social media post on July 10th, but it was actually July 5th. So on July 5th, my mom told me, you have 24 hours to leave the house and never come back. And it was about 2 months after that I was living in an Airbnb situation. There was roommates, but we were separate. I wasn't have a person in my room. And I was living on a property with the Airbnb host, who was also a crazy narcissist, controlling, manipulative person. And I don't know, my guess is that even if I was in a very healing sanctuary, that I would still encounter what I'm about to tell you with my eating. So again, it was about 2 months and 3 months into me being orphaned by my family. Haven't heard from anyone since. No friends of family. Nobody reached out to me. That I had trouble eating. So in my history, the only issues that I had with eating were my allergies. And then there's also and I've talked to so many different people about this, men, women, people who don't have eating disorders. The only other issue I had with food is living alone. I wouldn't buy a block of cheese, I wouldn't buy a whole bunch of chocolate, or I wouldn't buy a whole pint of ice cream unless I knew that I wanted to eat the whole thing. And I've heard that across the board with a lot of people. So that's not something I would even say. I mean, it's literally just those three foods. I mean, I wouldn't eat the whole block of cheese in one sitting. I actually don't think I've ever eaten a whole pint of ice cream in one sitting, but that's just because I'm so small. Nevertheless, I would eat those foods very quickly, and that wouldn't be good for my health, so I wouldn't have those things in the house. So when I'm having this difficulty eating, what's actually happening is I have all the food that I'm going to consume that's good for me and tasty. I have snacks, I have healthy food, I have just comfort food. I have it all around me, and I would have it in front of me, and I would know it was time to eat, and then I wouldn't be able to eat it. And luckily, earlier in the year, I had wanted to lose weight because I was overweight, and I studied on Noom. And Noom is a place that you can really understand how many calories your body needs. And so because I had been working with Noom before, I knew exactly how many calories my body needed to be healthy, to function. And never in my life have I ever wanted to consume too few calories to function. I'm connected to my passion, my dharma, my work so much. It would not help anyone if I were to starve myself. So I would be sitting in front of the food, and luckily, sometimes when I just really couldn't eat, I would call a friend, and one of them was living on the property, and I would say, hey, so-and-so, I have all the food in front of me, there's enough for you, but I can't do anything with it. She'd say, okay, I'm on my way, and she would just chop up the food, put it all together, and we'd eat together. Well, fast forward, I get out of that abusive Airbnb, and when I get into the place, the next place, which was after a bout of homelessness in my car. So when I got to the next place with a roof over my head that didn't have wheels, it wound up that I didn't have trouble eating. I would eat food. In fact, when I was in this place, I was literally eating 3 meals a day plus snacks. And I was losing weight. And I was losing weight at an uncontrollable rate. And what happened at that time was I was looking inward deeply and healing. And I started to think about, so with the Munchausen by proxy, there's a whole bunch of just quick. If you look up Munchausen by proxy, you'll see some common signs and symptoms are asthma, allergies, failure to thrive. Well, guess who had asthma, allergies, and failure to thrive? So the asthma and allergy thing, I feel like at that point I had done a lot of mental digestion around. I had kind of massaged it and looked into it and understood what was going on. But the failure to thrive thing was something that I was like, okay, I really need to look into this. And the thing that I wanted to know, which I still have not actually been able to find online, if anyone has any resources on this or information, I would love it. Online, I wasn't able to find out information about what happens when someone's diagnosed with failure to thrive and they become an adult and nothing was done. So when I looked it up online, it was failure to thrive. The antidote is better nutrition, and it's most likely removed the child from the environment because it's an abusive, neglectful environment. So I was never removed from my family unit, and it continued that abuse continued to happen my whole life, the gaslighting and calling me crazy. My mom would feed me things that I was allergic to, and then I would get upset about it because I would be having an allergic reaction, and I would have been really hungry. And, the story is that I was crazy because I would get upset about it, when the truth is that kindergarten through college, nobody in the school system ever fed me anything that I was allergic to. Yet for 6 years straight, every Easter, every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, I was fed something I was allergic to, and I would be knocked out on Benadryl and in pain every single holiday. And as a teen, it was about once a week that my mom would say, "Oops, I forgot that you were allergic to that." And then the whole family believes that I'm crazy because I was a crazy teenager getting upset about it. So with the failure to thrive thing, I was like, I've got to digest this more. Now, when I say digest, I don't mean food. I'm talking about the ideas and understanding it and healing. So I looked it up and I was like, okay, what happens when you're an adult? XYZ. Now, what had happened is right before I looked this up, I added things into my diet that I didn't normally have. So I was not a vegetarian because I knew already that my body needed red meat about every week and a half. It doesn't matter. I eat my greens. I take vitamins. I still have not been able to not eat red meat every week and a half. But my diet was plant-based, pretty much otherwise. Like, I didn't really cook or have meat in the house. My favorite meal was like chickpeas and rice with, a stir-fry vegetable. I wasn't eating any eggs. I wasn't eating any cheese. I was starting to put cheese on everything. I started eating egg sandwiches. I started eating steel-cut oats mixed in with walnuts, and I was sort of making those steel-cut oats and then putting them in a blender to kind of like make this baby food to make it easily digestible for me. I didn't find any of this stuff online, but when I did that, I stopped losing the weight. I didn't gain any weight, but I stopped losing the weight when I integrated those foods. So what happened was, this is kind of where I was with it. And this is great. I was very low on funds, and it was around Christmas time, and I was very isolated with where I was, and I found out that there was a queer Christmas market. And I was like, oh, these are my people. Great. I'm queer. Let's go meet some other queers. And I had zero money. And so I was just going to kind of like meet people. And I also had zero people to buy Christmas presents for, besides myself, of course. And I parked, and on my way into the Christmas market, I found a $10 bill on the ground. So I went inside with this $10, and there was nothing that I wanted to purchase at the booths. And I kid you not, I don't actually know if I've ever paid for a reading before. I'm trying to think. I think there was one tarot card reading I got at a Bed-Stuy bar probably like 10 years ago for like $10 or something. I'm not against it. I do practice what I preach, as in I trust myself, so therefore I don't need someone to read for me, although I do feel like every good therapist needs a therapist, every good psychic needs a therapist, every good coach needs a therapist. So anyways, all of a sudden I saw this person at the queer market, and it was like, you. No, I didn't say that, but in my head it was like, psh, you. This person. This is how I want to spend this $10 that Spirit just gifted me. So all I said was intuitive healings or something like that. And it was just like one sign, and there was just a person there with a mask on, knew nothing about them at all, didn't say anything about them. And I went up to that person and was like, hey, like it says $20 for 20 minutes, but all I have is $10. Would you be willing to do $10 for 10 minutes? If not, I completely understand. And they're like, yeah, sure, that's fine. My blood sugar's a little low, so I'm just going to go eat something and come back. So I made some other friends with people on the couch. It was great. They were awesome. And I come over. It turns out this person is called Lex. And I was like, so what is it that you do, Lex? And Lex was like, well, I don't really know how to describe it. I just kind of let my guide speak. And I was like, all right. So Lex guided me through guided meditation just to get us relaxed and open, and then really hit the nail on the head. So literally 24 hours before this reading, I had done an inner child meditation. And Lex was saying, inner child, like just straight off the bat. And then Lex said, specifically when you were an infant. And I was like, okay. So there was healing that needed to happen around infancy. And Lex said a whole bunch of other really cool stuff, and it was over, and it was really awesome. So then I went to... Oh, this is cool. So then I came home from that reading, and that's when I started to really dig into the failure to thrive stuff, because that was what was happening when I was an infant, and I was covered in a rash when I was an infant. So as I was looking up failure to thrive from being an infant, this one study said when failure to thrive is caused by nutritional deficiencies, that you need these certain amino acids and omegas, and that you needed food combining, which was carbohydrates, fat, and protein. That you needed all three of these things together when you ate, and that the foods high in these amino acids and omegas were eggs, cheese, oats, walnuts, whole milk, Greek whole milk yogurt, fish, and some other foods. And so, like cottage cheese, I think was one of them. So it's interesting that right before I found this article, I intuitively started bringing those things back into my diet. And so from then on, I integrated a lot of the foods that I just named. And what happened was, again, I didn't start gaining weight, but I stopped losing weight. And what's really interesting is my wounds were having a really hard time healing, which is part of the symptoms of this. And also on the back of my hands was a terrible rash, which most people were very quick to say, oh, it's eczema. I have eczema too. No. It was not eczema. And the reason why I know is because no creams that were healing eczema in my past would heal it. So if I put on Benadryl, if I put on, what do you call that other stuff? Oh, if you put hydrocortisone cream, and I also had prescription, really strong steroid meds that still did not take care of this rash. It did not matter what I put on it. So I found out foods high in amino acids and specific omegas. I really needed the omegas to be able to stop these symptoms of failure to thrive. So I remember way back when, I don't know if you remember from last episode, I said that I went through a candida cleanse. I just mentioned it in passing. Well, when I went through that candida cleanse, I got a dietary consultation with the one and only Amanda Young, who we had on this podcast. And she mentions in the podcast that she was on how she made the transition, the leap from being a dietitian to working with goddess archetypes, which is amazing. So this is way back before she made that full transition. And really what I wanted to do was I wanted to make sure while I was on the cleanse that I was getting the essential nutrition that I needed. I didn't want to sort of wither away or be lacking in any way. So when I was in that session, she had told me that grass-fed meats and grass-fed milk or dairy products are much higher in omegas than non-grass-fed. So when I went to go get the whole milk and the whole Greek yogurt, I made sure to get grass-fed. So what happened was, if I had which was constant, I had this rash on the back of my hands. If I drank an entire 16-ounce glass of grass-fed whole milk, within 15 minutes, the inflammation in my hands would go down. And if I drank enough of it, it would go away, but it was very temporary. So during this time, I literally, for months, had to get up in the middle of the night to drink grass-fed whole milk to make sure that my skin stayed intact. It's pretty intense. So, just to sort of summarize where we are now, I'm no longer losing weight uncontrollably. I still am packing on the amino acids and the omegas. I'm taking supplements. Every single meal I have is filled with them and a specific food combining. I'm not losing weight. I have a terrible rash, or it's a really skin breakdown on my hands. I'm not losing weight anymore. And this is where I mentioned in the last episode, where towards the end, where I had this sort of like phantom guilt in my head. And I don't actually feel guilt that often, to be honest, because I break it down pretty quickly. There was no friends or family saying to me, I didn't have any family, and I had very few friends. There were no friends or family saying to me, like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid you're losing weight, you have a rash, you should really go check out what a doctor has to say. Nobody was saying that to me, but in my head, they were saying that to me, and it was causing me to feel guilt. So I made a doctor's appointment, and it was also just time for my annual physical, to be honest. So I went into my doctor. Now, here's an interesting thing about this primary care doctor. This was like the third time I'd ever seen her, and my initial meeting with her was super amazing. She comes in, and she's got Flower of Life rings on. Now, for those of you who don't know, it's about sacred geometry. It's like super spiritual, super nerdy, super high vibe, and amazing. She's got crystals around her neck, and she's got moldavite earrings. Like, full stop for those of you who know what it means. For those of you who don't know, without getting too woo, this is just awesome. Moldavite comes from one place and one place only on the earth. It's where a meteorite crashed with the earth, and it's this green kind of raisiny glass that resulted from this meteorite crash. So it's basically half alien, right? It's not from our planet. And it's very unique, and it has a really intense vibration. A lot of times people will hold moldavite, and it might be too much for them. I had a moldavite ring that I got at a thrift store for super cheap because I didn't know what it was, and within a month it walked away. I really do mean that. I was at a pool, and I took the jewelry off and put it at the side of the pool, and when I came out, the jewelry was gone. So obviously someone stole it, but still, I've never had any crystals stolen from me before, so it walked off. It was really, really intense energy. Anyhow, I couldn't wear it all the time. So she comes in with these moldavite earrings, and she's a Western medical doctor who's just, I got her through the insurance company. It's like I wasn't paying that $500 fee that I talked about that my friend did in the last episode. So I thought she was really cool. The first time I met her, I told her what I did for a living. She was like really in vibe with it. She was like, I love that stuff. Great for you. And we were like really in sync. I was like, I've got the best doctor ever. So this time, what happens is, when I'm at my physical, and this is not her fault per se, it just is the system. I basically have 15 minutes with her. 15 minutes with her to tell her that I've been diagnosed with ADD and I'm on Adderall, that I am on the autism spectrum, that I had what's called catabolic distress, which I'll talk about in just a second, that I was kicked out from my family from Munchausen by proxy. So that's 5 crazy things. Also, I wanted a referral to a neurologist. So 6 crazy big things that I needed to talk to her in about 15 minutes time. Now, not just with what we talked about last episode, but I had been gaslit by other doctors. Now, here's the other crazy thing. As a kid, I was over-medicated. I was on 12 different types of pills to the point where I was deemed legally handicapped by the state of New York for an illness that I didn't have because my mom screamed at every doctor. And she bullied them into it. They were scared of her. That's why I never got help, because they were scared of her. And then I come in and I'm nervous that I won't be able to get my needs met. And this is what happens with someone who's supposed to be on the level. So real quick, catabolic distress is what I was encountering with the losing weight uncontrollably, with the rash. So catabolic distress is usually something that happens after a major injury, like you get severe burns all over your body, or you have a crazy, crazy surgery, something like this. What happens is your body goes into emergency mode. And that's why I needed all those omegas and those amino acids. That's why I was drinking so much fat, right? Easily digestible fat. Because my body was basically on high alert, saying emergency, emergency, emergency. Now, I wasn't burned all over my body. I didn't have a crazy surgery, but I was orphaned by my entire family. I was homeless. I did lose 90% of my friends because they were in the same dynamic with my family that I had no idea. They were projecting onto me and gaslighting and just doing all sorts of things that when I tell people about it now, they're like, I would never have a friend who did that. That's why I lost a lot of them, which was very hard. But in the end, one ending is the beginning of something better, right? But in the meantime, there's a lull. So my body psychology was saying, hey, you're all alone on an island. You've been burned all over your body. You've had a major surgery. You've cut off from your family tree. You don't have roots. You don't have a trunk. You don't have branches. You don't have resources. You don't have safe shelter. You don't know where your food's going to come from. You don't know if you'll have a safe place to sleep tomorrow. So it also wound up happening that I had to stop going outside during the winter. I usually hike through all 4 seasons. I just bundle up. But I actually got frostbite going 3 blocks in the winter because of this catabolic distress, because all of the energy it's like when you're in fight or flight mode, all of the energy was going towards my essential organs inside my torso, and the blood was not flowing to my hands or my feet. So I had to stay inside where it was warm, and I got frostbite on my feet despite wearing wool socks and warm boots. I wasn't walking around barefoot outside. So I go to my annual physical, and she wasn't wearing mold white earrings this time, but that's besides the point. She takes my vitals and learns about these things, and I tell her that I tell her that I'm a survivor of Munchausen by proxy, And she mishears me, and she only hears Munchausen. And she says, why do you think that you're a survivor of Munchausen? And a lot of times when you're talking to people about Munchausen by proxy, and it's established that that's what you're talking about, you'll just say it short for Munchausen. So I said by proxy, and she verbalized back Munchausen. So I just thought she was, vibing with me. And I said, oh, XYZ. And she said, oh, by proxy. And I was like, yep. And then I was like, I got kicked out of my family. And she said, well, why did you get kicked out of your family? And I was like, yeah, and I was homeless. And she was like, why did you get kicked out of your family? I said, oh, because my mom's a covert narcissist. And her response was with disgust and very quick. And she said, no, that's too clinical of an answer. And I was like, okay. And from this point, I was just had to placate to the monster at this point. And so I said, okay. She says, no, there must be something that you did to get kicked out. What is it that they're telling everyone? If they said to people why you're kicked out, what is it that they were saying? This is horrific abuse gaslighting, let me just tell you. Horrific, especially after you hear Munchausen by proxy. Whew. So I explained to her, I say, they kicked me out because I repeatedly was asking them to be kind. And she was like, and I was like, yeah, I asked them to be as kind to me as they were in front of the neighbors as they were behind closed doors. So then she looks at me, again, with disgust and disdain, and she goes, well, you need help. And I was like, yes. Yes, I do. And that's why I'm here. I have a therapist, and I have a psychiatrist. But that's why I'm telling you, because I need help. And I wasn't doing it in any sort of condescending tone. I was saying yes, we agree on this. It's like when you see a mama bear with her cubs, and she's like, you need to get out of here, and you start to back up, and you're like, I agree. Yes, I do need to get out of here, and so I'm going to do that right now. And you start kind of backing up. That was kind of the energy. So she says, you need help, and I was like, yeah, I do. And then she was like, well, your body is telling you something, with all this body stuff. And I was like, yeah, I agree. It is. That's what I teach. I'm so glad as a medical doctor that you and I agree on this, because I do believe that the body speaks. And she says, well, have you ever heard of Gabor Mate? And I was like, actually, yeah, I know the woman who's dating his son. I know about his work. And she goes, well, he teaches that trauma is stored in the body, and the body tells you what's up. I was like, yeah, he does. And that's what I've been teaching for 15 years, too. I'm so glad that we're in alignment. And she's like, well, you should watch his stuff. She's gnashing her teeth. She's telling me this stuff. Also during this session, she starts to infer that I might be on some other kind of drugs, or that I might have too high a dose of Adderall. This is about 8:45 in the morning. As I told you, in 15 minutes, I had to talk about 6 major things, and I was already concerned that I wouldn't be understood. And when she took my vitals, I had just finished telling her about Munchausen by proxy and getting kicked out. So guess where my heart rate was? So then she asked me, if I want to do a pee test right then and there. And the truth is that I would have, except in about a month or so, I had to drive back that way to do a pee test, and I was actually going to meet my current therapist for the first time in person, which I was excited about because I like her. So I was like, no, I don't need to do that now. I'll do it in a month or so, when I go, meet my therapist. And if I didn't do the pee test in person later, then there wouldn't be a reason for me to travel all that way. It was about an hour and a half to have my in-person session with my therapist, because it's all been over Zoom this whole time. So I was like, two birds with one hand. I'll feed two birds with one hand when I go back. So that was a horrific experience. Now, what's interesting in terms of referring back to last episode, catabolic distress was not something that was in her flowchart. She literally said to me, that's not an option that I could even put down in the computer. I was like, oh, okay, well, I know. I thought to myself, I didn't say it out loud. I was like, I know what that's all about because of what I explained to you last episode. So I said to her, okay, so catabolic distress is not something is not an option for you. Does that mean that you're not even going to write it down? She's like, no, there's nowhere for me to put it. There's no option. I said, okay, so that means like you're not going to like refer me to like a nutritionist or any kind of help here because I'm not losing weight anymore? And she's like, that's right. She's like, I don't even think you could get a nutritionist. You have to have diabetes to have a nutritionist. There'd be no nutritionist that could see you, and I doubt that they would even know what you were talking about. Like, that's literally basically word for word what my doctor said to me. I said, okay, so since I'm no longer losing weight, you're just not going to do anything about it. She's like, yep. Ooh. Yeah. Luckily, my therapist, who is officially a mental health counselor, but I call her my therapist, she was just like, I can't even believe. She was horrified, jaw drops to the floor when I tell her about it. And, it was about a day or two later that I was like, you know what? Like, let me just drop in on old Gabor Monte, see what he's up to these days. And I go onto his YouTube, and this is not a complaint, it's just a fact, but like there's literally no YouTube video that you can watch of his that's under 2 hours. Good for him, but there wasn't just some kind of like quick thing. So there's a phrase called Bible dipping from the book Running with Scissors. Is it Running with Scissors? Yeah, Running with Scissors. It just means like using like a book like an oracle deck where you just sort of open to a random page and a random phrase and you sort of use that as a symbol. So I did a quote-unquote Bible dip oracle thing on this one YouTube video. It was 2 hours long, and so I just kind of randomly started the play button in the middle of the video. I kid you not, this was awesome. He was like, you know what? Especially because I've been talking about cults for so long. He's like, you know what? When people get when they study to be doctors and nurses, those colleges and those schools use the same tactics as cults. They're sleep deprived. They don't have any time for themselves or to talk about anything else or to think about anything else or to look inward. And many of our doctors and nurses have not dealt with their own stuff and therefore cannot help you and may be re-traumatizing you. I was like, all right, Gabor. Thanks, doc. Like, this is literally, I was like, that's all I needed to know. Like, that was the best confirmation ever. It's like the way that doctor treated me didn't have to do with me. It had to do with her own resolved trauma, all her own unresolved trauma. And yes, my story and what has happened to me is traumatic and one of the most intense things I've ever heard of. Like, I still talk to my therapist today and talk about how surreal it is. I never thought in my entire life that I would lose my entire family. I never thought I would lose my mom or my dad before they died. Never, ever, ever. So, I don't want this ending of the podcast to be like, so don't trust anyone in the medical profession. No, because like my mental health counselor is amazing and helps me advocate for myself. And I just advocated for myself with another doctor without her helping me. My mental health counselor was on vacation. And if she wasn't, I would have brought into the session how I wanted to change my meds. And she's not the prescriber, and we would have like kind of like role played it or whatever. But I did it all by myself, and I felt good about it. I have what I need now. And the only reason why I need to role play all that stuff is because, yeah, I've been treated terribly in the past. Absolutely horrifically. I still have to, whenever I'm asked to repeat something I do, it's mind-blowing to me that my mom bullied so many doctors to give me so much medication. And I'm in a place where I'm like, they won't even write down what I have. So, both with my guts in the last episode and with my skin and my body and everything else in this episode, Western medicine didn't offer a way through the flowchart. But I got my needs met anyway. Now, I'm going to say something, and some of you may not agree with this. That's okay. I wouldn't say it unless I believed it. I believe it's possible. And by the way, there's so much hope that I don't have. I don't have any hope about my family. I really don't. The statistics, the data, their history, I have no hope. And I do believe in miracles too, but I have no hope for them. I mean, with reconciling and all that jazz. So what I'm about to say is pretty major. You know, I believe and I have hope that in my lifetime, again, I'm 42, so we're a little less than halfway there, we will have this partnership. And you won't have to pay $500 an hour for a Western medical doctor who works outside your insurance company. And you won't have to go on the black market to get your medicine. It's true that the Supreme Court just reversed things so that a lot of people who become potential mothers without wanting to be might need to break some laws, and they will. Last time it happened, they broke the law, and they were in much more danger for a myriad of reasons that we all know. But the way things work, and I wish I could just import you into my visual space so you could see what I'm seeing. But the way things work is the pendulum swings. So picture a pendulum swinging all the way out to the left and all the way out to the right. And you want it to be in the middle. Well, as it slows down, it goes all the way to the left and all the way to the right. And the next time it goes all the way to the left, it goes a little bit less out. And the next time it goes all the way to the right, it goes a little bit less out. And the next time it swings all the way to the left, a little less, and 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 a little less. But it also happens a little faster, too, right? It goes swing, 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 right? So just be aware of that pattern. As you know, sometimes they say, don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle, or things get harder or worse before they get better. Don't let this latest Supreme Court thing allow you to give up hope. Because if you give up hope, there's nothing that can be done. You're not going to do anything. And I don't believe that that's the case with trusting our bodies and working with the Western medical system. And I think, sort of as a final note, this is interesting. I didn't think I was going to share this. So I believe in an energy that connects us all. If you want to call that Great Spirit, if you want to call that the universe, if you want to call that God or source or energy, it's fine. It's the great everything, right? So that's what I believe in. And When people would ask me why I would believe in that, I have a concrete answer, a scientific answer. So the people who believe in that statistically have healthier bodies and happier, long-living lives. Or longer, statistically. The people who don't believe in it, statistically, get sicker more often and die sooner and are more unhappy and more depressed. Now, also statistically, people who are realists are, the depressed people who see things, quote unquote, for how they are more statistically right. But guess what? No inventor saw things as they were and said everything's copacetic, we're just going to keep it as is. It's not how innovation is happening. That's not how we move forward. Seeing things as they are is important. We don't want to spiritually bypass things. We don't want to say everything's sunshine and roses. No, we have to digest things. We have to go through things. But we also get to have hope in something better. And how this applies to what I was saying is, I don't believe that we're here on the planet in 2022 to go downhill or to keep things as the same. I don't think we would even be here. And that's where you have free will. The cool thing about free will and your beliefs is you can keep them to yourself. No one has to know whether or not you believe in some higher power or an energy that connects us all. In fact, you can even lie. If your whole family is a family of atheists and doesn't believe anything and they try to talk to you about it, you can be like, yeah, I'm still an atheist. I don't believe in a higher power. I don't believe in an energy that connects us all. We're just going to die. And that's it. And I'm not like being condescending if that's what you actually believe. I'm saying that you can keep your beliefs to yourself. No one will know. But you'll know. And your body will know. And one way leads more to the life that we want, more to the world that we want, more towards health and happiness and longevity and productivity. And I will admit, what is right now is not okay. If you lose hope, you're giving more energy to that entropy of things falling apart. If you get angry, good. Anger's good. Only anger's not. But anger means something's wrong. It means you have fire. And guess what? If you're angry about legislation, you might do something about it. Hopefully you do, because otherwise it'll probably eat you up from the inside. So now you have the framework for how to trust your gut, how to trust your body, and work with the medical system. There's so much magical intuition that's woven in these stories. Everything from me saying like, yeah, I'll take those colonics, which was like totally weird, to finding $10 on the ground, to doing an inner child meditation, to randomly adding eggs and walnuts and oats and cheese into my diet. Those aren't random. That's my intuition. So, whether it's with your body, your family, your friends, your health, the future, the legislature, your finances, your career, your house, your kids, your hobbies, whatever it may be, mental health, physical health, spiritual health, if you would like to trust yourself without second guessing, in the face of fear, doubt, and uncertainty, I've got you. Just take that free class. Now's the time to learn your unique language. Thank you so much for being here. Together, we can make change. I'm glad you're here with me. And until next time, may your intuition be with you. This episode of Trust Yourself, the podcast, is created, written, and produced by me, your host, Betsy LaFay. Music provided by the amazing and generous Ben Talmi. Thanks, Ben. If you'd like to find out more about me and my work, and specifically how you can trust your intuition, head over to betsylafay.com. Thanks again for being here. See you next time. Oh yeah, and if you like the show, please subscribe and give us a review. It's one of the best ways to help us get the word out to other people like you. Of course, if you know anyone else that would find this podcast helpful, pass it along to them. Sharing is caring.